Welcome to the NITW Podcast. A quick disclaimer that this episode discusses topics related to suicide, self-harm, and mental health. Please use your discretion if this material may be distressing or harmful to you.
As a person, as a neurodivergent person, or even as a neurotypical, if I look at this as a line, on one end of the line, I have these negative mental health outcomes, the struggle with suicidality. And on the other side, we have exceptional levels of innovation and resilience, what we call like empowerment. And when we look at the neurodivergent profile, we just lengthen this line. We are more prone to these negative mental health outcomes. It's exceptional for us. We're exceptionally at risk for it. But we also offer an exceptional level of innovation and resilience. And so not only are the things that we're talking about get you away from the negative stuff, but every move away from that moves you in the direction of delivering what organizations are looking for, what the military is looking for, which is alignment of these cognitive strengths with mission outcomes.
Beautifully put. Welcome back to NITW Podcast. I'm Charles Kransberger. We're a team of consultants who are trying to deliver as much value as possible to neurodivergent professionals and their employers. With us today, we're joined by Shale Norwitz. Shale, thanks for coming on.
Awesome. It's awesome to be here.
So, Shale, we've been connected on LinkedIn for a few years, but have really just been talking the last few months and kind of hit it off, right? And we're able to attend a conference in Nashville together last month, and it's been amazing to hear your story, what a ride it's been, right? And hear about how later on in your 20-year career in the Air Force, you found out that you were part of this neurodivergent community, and as you were transitioning and thinking about what's next, you've dived into launching this nonprofit, NeuroDynamic Network, and have this very clear mission in mind for what's next for you and what you're trying to do with this next 20-year run, right? So tell our audience a little bit about that. Where do you fit in this whole neurodiversity employment ecosystem, and what are you trying to achieve?
Yeah, so I served 20 years in the Air Force. I was IT the whole time, and it was a couple years out from my 20-year mark that I received a autism diagnosis. It was part of a journey in learning about my son and his diagnosis that I learned about myself, and in that process of learning about myself and my son and what this word autism and neurodivergence means, I started to see these patterns throughout my career where I had served in space and intel and the tactical communications field, and these patterns of kind of unexplained struggles with mental health and unexplained suicides. And so when I saw these patterns, and I learned that I'm surrounded by neurodivergent people, and also neurodivergent people are exponentially at risk for suicidality, that I felt compelled that I had to do something rather than just knowing this new information. So that's when I started the Air Force's Neurodiversity Initiative. And since retiring, to continue that continuity of mission, that continuity of knowledge, to give ownership to the community over the voice and the message, which is a bit of a challenge when you're in the military, because when you're in the military comes first, right? So you don't own the message, and so that's part of the overall vision for this organization and what we're looking to achieve.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it's amazing that you were able to, like you said, break ground in that space and launch into that conversation and grow that initial awareness. It takes a lot of thrust to get that conversation on the ground in any system, right? So, yeah, kudos to you for that work, launching that initiative and so on. And, yeah, it seems like you said, through the process of that diagnosis, kind of looking at your career in hindsight, a lot of things made sense, and there were a lot of things that you were trying to figure out and be like, okay, I see the problem now, what's the solution, right? So what do you see as some of those solutions or that opportunity in national security that you're trying to deliver to the marketplace?
The greatest challenge that I've been faced with is confronting this misconception that neurodivergence, so in this context we're talking about ADHD and mild autism, but that this misconception that neurodivergence is rare in the military.
Right.
And when you look at what neurodivergent people are attracted to, what drives them towards military service, it starts to become common sense as to why there's such a strong representation there. So if we're looking at the ASD, the autism perspective, the structure, the motivation for deep knowledge and understanding how things are interconnected, it's not something that you easily find in private work. And in public service and in the military, it's all written down. And so when you join the military, you know how your daily tasks are tied to your team's mission, your organization's mission, your branch of services mission, the National Defense Strategy, and then your oath of enlistment or your oath to the Constitution. And that amount of transparency and immediate sense of purpose, along with the structure. So autistic brains, as we navigate, either diagnosed or undiagnosed, as we've navigated society, we've created a system of rules in order to help us adapt to social environments and expectations. And so as we reach this age where military service becomes a possibility, we have built a series of rules that some have worked and some we're still working on, but that the military presents, entire volumes of how to dress, how to carry yourself in and out of uniform, how to be a good soldier, sailor, airman, but also how to be a good citizen. And so all of the rules are provided, and the structure, and you don't have to pick out what you want to wear, and the chow hall is always open, and so you don't even have to worry about what you're going to buy at the grocery store, what you can eat. So like there's so much about tying into people's sense of purpose, and also like the strengths of the autistic mind that make the military very attractive. If you look at it from the ADHD perspective, which is very much like, I like to think of it, it's like the explorer gene that's been unlocked. Like we all have this in us, but in like the ADHD mind, it's been unlocked, and so the adventure of moving duty stations and getting exposed to different missions and going to different countries and doing such different work than what you've encountered this far in your life really, really appeals to the ADHD mind. And yeah, go ahead.
And it's almost kind of counterintuitive, right? Because to this day, autism is an automatic disqualifier for military service. But like you had said, so many people like yourself and others weren't recognized at the time of entry, and felt this real congruence, or felt that it was attractive to have these systems and structures and missions in place that really aligned with who they were and where they were trying to go in their cognitive profile, right? So it has created this misconception, I think, amongst a lot of people, like you said, that there aren't neurodivergent folks in the military, when actually they might be over-indexed, particularly in these certain types of skill sets and roles like you're talking about. So it's one myth that we definitely wanted to bust today, in terms of, it's disqualifying, these people aren't even there. Like, no, they're definitely there. We've met them, we've shook their hands and heard their stories, and you can distill some of those stories into themes about how it went for them when they were involved in their military service, and what that looked like from a belonging and wellness perspective, and so on, right?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a while, and if I do nothing else, it's have a lot of conversations with a lot of folks. And when you talk to leaders in these spaces where technical expertise is valued, they are aware, they have this growing awareness of the high prevalence of neurodivergence. So when you take the military or public service or law enforcement that is attractive to neurodivergent minds, upon entry into enlistment, you take a psychometric test called the ASVAB. And when you look at the ASVAB, it really is testing for these cognitive strengths that divergent minds are good at, like exceptionally good at. And it results in placement into career fields with high ASVAB scores in these technical areas. So if you have high mechanical, cognition, right? So people with dyslexia have it as well, but it's known amongst the neurodivergent population that where you may have challenges in social, you have these exceptional gifts in spatial reasoning, which when you sit down and take the ASVAB, you end up with these super high scores on understanding the mechanics and flow of things. And so you get placed into aircraft mechanic roles or pattern analysis. You get placed into IT roles. And so these highly technical skills are always in high demand and usually in low supply. These are the critically undermanned career fields in the branches of the military. And so because this places folks, you end up with these high concentrations of neurodivergence in space, intel, and IT, technology, anything that requires specialization and technical expertise. And even in the areas of like officer commission, where the ASVAB may not be as relevant, our neurotypes, the divergent mind, naturally gravitates towards systems thinking and processing and deep knowledge, which makes us nerds. And so nerds end up in nerdy career fields.
Sure.
And so not only do you have leaders who end up there as a gravitation to these areas of expertise, but you also have high concentrations of enlisted folk who are there due to their cognitive placement. And so that's how you end up with this. And this is something that a lot of folks in the military are aware of, but then they don't know what do I do? What do I do in response to this? And so for us as an organization, the goal is to understand what these needs are from various perspectives, from leader perspectives, from first-line supervisor perspectives, from the individual folks who are serving, who are neurodivergent, who are struggling to communicate their needs, who are unaware of these needs, and finding a path forward to enabling these conversations to happen. So we've covered how we've gotten to this point, right? Like, why is it attractive, and how do we end up with these concentrations of neurodivergent folks? I explained this whole thing to Reggie Ordonez. He's the founder of Warrior Rising, which is a veteran entrepreneurship think tank. Like he's a mentor in the space. And so I explained all this to him, and he looks at me and he goes, "So what?"
Right.
So what? And I've been thinking about it ever since. and so I think of so what as an apple, and I want to slice the apple in half. And so I have these two halves. And the first half is the clinical understanding of the implications of where we are. And then there's the human aspect of this. And so first to look at the science and the understanding. For over a decade, the VA and has looked at, and the defense health system has looked at prevalence of ADHD. They've seen that ADHD is not a significant risk to retention, right? That they had originally feared it. And so there has been repeated calls to reduce the restriction on ADHD ascensions. But the other data point, this big data point, is that so anybody at all who is who has ADHD, if they are unsupported, they're at a high risk for suicide. If you are in the military and you have ADHD and you are unsupported, then that places you at an exponential risk for.
When you say unsupported, how would you define those supports that are helpful in those types of use cases?
So the initial inclination is to say undiagnosed. But people might have diagnoses and not seek mental health care because they don't want the military to know about it.
Sure.
Or they may have a diagnosis, but they don't want to seek help because they don't want to be flagged and then subject to separations or med board or scrutiny. Mm-hmm. Or they don't want to get medication because it may preclude them from being able to participate in the full spectrum of their career field's operations. And some of that's true, and some of that's stigma, and the lack of transparency and the lack of deliberate action behind this just further perpetuates all of this fear and uncertainty. So when I say unsupported, I don't mean undiagnosed. I mean that you may know it about yourself, but you may not be getting the support, or you may be undiagnosed and not getting the support.
Right. And like you were saying, that all of those factors in combination have this compounding effect and can be very distressing to folks in those types of situations and not seeing great outcomes, to say the least, right?
Yeah. And some disturbing figures is like between 2014 and 2018, the rates of ADHD diagnoses in the general public have been above 10%. And the people of age during those periods, so you go back 10 to 18 years, and even those diagnosis rates were in the 4, 5, 6%.
Right.
But when you look at the diagnosis rates of ADHD in the military between 2014 and 2017, those diagnosis rates are in half and they're declining. And that's a huge red flag because it means, well, there's a number of conclusions we could draw from that, but it definitely paints a picture that there is a large unsupported population of folks in the military, and the trend is not going in the direction of them getting more support, but getting less.
Right. Yeah, like you said, something's not adding up there. The general population trend and the rate of support in the military system kind of go in opposite directions based on that data. Yeah.
So we were back to this apple where we have this clinical perspective of diagnosing conditions and applying treatment and these measurable outcomes, which is super valuable, but it's only one half of this picture. And the other half of the picture is the human aspect. I call it the non-clinical approach. And when you look at the field of support for divergent minds, like ADHD coaching, and when you look at the field of support for veterans in non-clinical support systems, and when you look at this human aspect, what you are addressing is that folks like myself who have made it this far in their life without support systems, we have created mechanisms in order for us to adapt. And these are, sometimes they work, sometimes they don't, oftentimes they don't, and the patterns of where we struggle, especially in navigating social situations, these patterns, because we're not aware of our divergence, we internalize these things as an internal flaws. There's something wrong with me. Right. The environment is giving me this feedback that there's something wrong with me. And when you can connect with other veterans who have had similar experiences, or when you can connect with other neurodivergent people who have had similar experiences, then you learn that you're not alone and that these things aren't inherent flaws to who you are. They're challenges that many other people face, but that there's nothing wrong with you. What these are is trade-offs. You will have these exceptional gifts or these areas in which you derive exceptional levels of joy and purpose. And these challenges that you face, they are just what comes along with that. And being able to frame this as a bigger picture and to say, yes, I have these challenges, but because of these challenges, I am creative. Because of these challenges, I am curious. I am I'm awesome at all these unique things to me. And so this human aspect allows you to connect with people, and it allows you to reframe these things that you originally had internalized as flaws into things that are beautiful, that are wonderful, that are sources that you can find self-acceptance and self-love, where originally you didn't have that. And what I found in my personal experience, and what other folks that I've talked to have found since discovering their neurodivergence, is whenever they reach this ability to accept these things about themselves and love these things about themselves, they now turn to other people, and they can now extend this acceptance and love to other people. And whenever they do that, they get it reflected back, right? And that's been my experience in understanding this, and the response, the transformation in my life, from going to being somebody where most people said, hey, when I first met you, I thought you were a jerk, to people just genuinely liking being around me. And that's not normal for me. And the big change for that was definitely in finding these things about myself that I now, can find acceptance for. So if we reassemble this apple and we look at the human aspect, this non-clinical aspect, and we look at the clinical aspect, what we see is the two significant contributors to suicidality, which is a lack of human connection and a lack of a sense of purpose. So purpose is tied to productivity, is tied to measurable outcomes, right? That's what the clinical approach gives us. We can measure these things. And the human side of this is that immeasurable, emotional, human side of us that needs to be satisfied as well. And so, the answer to the so what really comes down to, as a person, as a neurodivergent person, or even as a neurotypical, if I look at this as a line, on one end of the line, I have these negative mental health outcomes, the struggle with suicidality. And on the other side, we have exceptional levels of innovation and resilience, what we call like empowerment. And when we look at the neurodivergent profile, we just lengthen this line. We are more prone to these negative mental health outcomes. It's exceptional for us. We're exceptionally at risk for it. But we also offer an exceptional level of innovation and resilience. And so not only are the things that we're talking about get you away from the negative stuff, but every move away from that moves you in the direction of delivering what organizations are looking for, what the military is looking for, which is alignment of these cognitive strengths with mission outcomes.
Beautifully put.
Yeah, the outcome of empowerment of divergent minds is the thing that businesses, that organizations want, which is innovation and resilience. And so like innovation and resilience is they're just two words, but they translate to so much of. So like the resilience side, especially in the military context, is why Special Forces recruits for these cognitive talents that we associate with autism and ADHD. It's why the warrant officer program in the Army and now in the Air Force, the cognitive profile that they're looking for is the ADHD, ASD cognitive profile. Like, it's why I've heard rumors about, awareness of high levels of neurodivergence in different areas and different branches. And it's because innovation and resilience are they're tied into so much. My favorite thing, and I'll have to cut myself off after this, which is in the military, whenever we think about strategic decision-making at the squadron level, so like at the 200 unit, the 200 people level, all the way up to like the highest levels of strategic thinking, those rooms are not auditoriums. their conference rooms.
Sure.
The average person around those tables, around 12 folks. And the quality of the decisions that come out that mean success or failure on the battlefield, that mean life or death, is determined by the diversity of perspectives in that room. And one of the things that is taught in many different corners of the military is the downfalls that come from groupthink, meaning too many people thinking too alike. And it is oftentimes the divergent person in the room, the one or two outliers who disagree or have differing perspectives. And what comes out of that is one of two things. Either you hear this differing perspective and then you make a better decision because of it, or you hear this differing perspective and you don't change your decision, but the people in the room feel more confident in the decision-making process because they've heard these challenging perspectives and they've forged the decision through these challenges. And that confidence alone is a game changer on the battlefield. And tapping into and making sure there's representation, that in these rooms of 12, that there is availability, that there is representation of divergent minds, is why recruitment and retention of divergent minds in the military is absolutely essential to maintaining and sharpening our strategic edge.
Beautifully said. No, I think you laid out really well as you're talking about that gap between the clinical perspective and the human-centered perspective, what kind of opportunity there is to decrease the downside, right, in terms of those bad outcomes that we're seeing for the military system as a whole and on the individual level for those neurodivergent folks, right, as well as increasing that upside, leveraging those strengths that you had talked about, building those systems of accountability by having different perspectives all in the same room, right? So I think that's beautifully said and translates really well to like a lot of the companies that we work with, right? Those perils of groupthink that you laid out, you absolutely see that at the C-suite level at some of these companies, and I think there's a lot of overlap there. So your mission is a big one, right? And you're going to have to eat that elephant one bite at a time. So as you look into your crystal ball at 2026, what's on your short-term roadmap as you start to tackle this challenge?
The vast majority of the folks who are most affected by this dynamic, they aren't that they just want to understand more, that they have the basic questions of what is this, what does it look like, what can I do? And what we lack is a narrative around this at all. We lack representation. We lack stories around what service in the military as a divergent thinker looks like. So, for us as an organization, our focus for 2026 is to do what we're doing right now, which is to have conversations with folks, to share those conversations broadly, and to inspire other people to do that as well. So for anybody who's wondering how can I contribute to this, like what is the 5-meter target writ large? And that is to encourage and inspire people to have these conversations with their teams, with their people. And just doing that alone allows people to see each other. It allows people to be seen. It allows them to see these things in themselves. And it encourages people to communicate about this topic that so many people want to communicate about, but just haven't found the words or the approach or the opportunity to have that conversation. So anything that anybody can do to have these conversations in those areas, that is the most valuable thing, and that's where we're going to focus our energy.
Yeah, and to that end, if somebody's in our audience right now, like, I'm on board, I'm fired up, I want to connect with Shale and support what he's doing with NeuroDynamic Network, where can they follow you, websites, socials, in-person events, whatever the case may be? How can they best support you or follow you or get involved?
Yeah, so our website is weareneurodynamic.org. We're on LinkedIn, and you can sign up for our newsletter at the bottom of our webpage. Any of those avenues will get you plugged into what we're doing. And we are at what they call the startup phase, right? We are in the strategic planning area where we are talking with folks and trying to identify the root causes and the problems that people are facing. So for all those who if you don't want to wait on me, I don't like to be the linchpin in anybody's thing. So yeah, you can follow us. Yes, get involved. Yes, reach out. But be your own engine, right? And fill your gas tank by just learning a little bit about ADHD and the lived experience. There's more information out there and great books that more so than there's ever been. It's such an approachable topic these days. So educate yourself a little bit about what that lived experience is. Have a conversation with a friend, about what their lived experience is. And same with autism spectrum disorder. And so educate yourself and then have these conversations and, stay in touch with us. And we'll continue to pave the road forward on making this more accessible for folks.
Love it. Yeah, and again, applaud you for stepping into the arena with the NeuroDynamic Network, and look forward to seeing what you do next.
I appreciate you as well and what you do. It's incredible stuff. And, we're two peas in a neurodiversity pod.
Yeah, most definitely. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Absolutely. Thanks.